In today's video, we're going to build this boss battle with awesome lasers and a boss that is easier to defeat than hitting him twice, hopefully, even though that's what's going to happen in this intro. Hi, my name is Michael. Welcome to my 2D action and adventure RPG tutorial series. Follow along and learn how to create your own ARPG in Godot 4 using GD script. All right, well, hello everybody. It's been a little bit, but here we are working on our boss battle finally. We're gonna build a basic boss battle here, and it's gonna consist of a boss with some moves that has hit points that we can defeat and things like that. So he'll have a defeat condition. Some things that we're not gonna tackle in this video is how to, have a cutscene when you enter the boss room. We'll have to deal with that in the future. Boss hit point bar. And of course, this is going to be kind of a straightforward boss. This is a one and done. He's not going to be super reusable. Although, I mean, you could reuse this boss in the code for another boss, but this one's going to be pretty tightly scripted for this particular encounter, which I think is an appropriate way to do a boss battle because they're generally a one-off, unique type of encounter. You could, however, develop, more of an AI system for your bosses and, build some behaviors kind of like we've done with our enemies, with our enemy state machine. But, maybe we'll do that in the future. But for this one, I want to take this approach. It's something a little bit different than we've done. And it's going to be probably a little bit long of a video, so bear with me. Now, the first thing that we're going to do is I'm going to just go to our boss scene. So where we left off is we had built this room and we'd put this boss energy beam attack in here. Let's go ahead and when we run the scene, we're just going to see this boss energy beam attack happen once, and then it'll go on repeat. We're going to actually remove that, but we're going to use these to create our boss battle, and we're going to use this room. So hopefully you've got a room kind of like this, and it has a door, so you should be able to find it. And I don't have a key. Let me go get a key real quick and make sure that this little mechanic still works. Yeah, there we go. There should be a key if I defeat the slimes in this room. Okay, there we go. So how this is going to work, right? You get the key, you come over here and open the door, and then you'll encounter the boss. Okay, we don't have the boss yet, so let's get to building it. Okay, so let's look at our project here. Now, if you've got this level set up, you should have... Well, in fact, let me just right click on this scene and say show in file system. It'll take me there. So in their levels, I've got a dungeon scene or a dungeon folder, I should say, with my different levels or boards for this area. And then I've made this Dark Wizard folder. If you've been following along, you've made this as well. And within this, I've got the energy beam and the energy orb scenes that we're going to use for our boss. And then there's also these assets. So if you need to grab the assets, go to the itch.io page, which is linked in the description to grab those or use your own. And then go ahead and drag in all of the audio files and the sprites that we'll need. And in particular, today, we're going to be focused a lot on this boss, cloak, and hand sprite. And, we'll get this energy explosion going when we defeat the boss as well. And then there's, of course, this boss HP bar sprite atlas that we'll use eventually to create the hit point bar for the boss. Okay, so make sure you've got all those in your folder and ready to go. And then open this scene. Okay, so in order to get this started, we've got some things set up here that are all well and good, right? We've got our torches and things like that. I want to create a new node 2D, so I'm just going to go ahead and, let's just add it to our level here. Node 2D. And I'm going to give this a name, and we'll call it the Dark Wizard boss. You could, of course, name it pretty much anything you want, but this is going to be for organizational purposes so that we can find all of our nodes related to the boss entity and put it in here. And I want to go into this. I want to select this and, oh boy, I'm having a hard time there. I want to select this and I want to come over here to the canvas item settings, and under visibility or under ordering, actually, let's do this. So Z is relative is good. I want Y sort enabled turned on. So by default, that's off. And of course, when we've got this top down 2D game, we've got the Y sorting. So based on the Y coordinate, the player can go in front of or behind. So if we leave this Y sort enabled off, then what happens is all of the nodes that we add as a child of this will be kind of Y sorted as if they're at this origin point right here in the top left corner, okay? And of course, we don't really want that. We want them to sort with the objects in the level. So let's turn Y-sort enabled on, and we should be good with that. And then underneath the wizard boss, let's go ahead and add a few things. I'm going to add another node 2D, and in fact, I'm going to call this the boss node, because even though this is called Dark Wizard Boss, we're going to have a node that contains the boss sprite, and we're going to move that all together. I want to create another folder for our beam attacks, so this is going to be another node 2D. And let me just go ahead and duplicate this one more time. So we're going to have a node for our beam attacks. Okay. So like this beam here, we're going to just have an assortment of these strewn across the level that we can enable at will. And then this last node that we created, I'm going to just call this PositionTargets. And how this is going to work is we're going to have this wizard kind of teleport around the map. And we could do that randomly, but I think, I don't know, for this, I want to do very specific points. So we're going to add some positions where we can teleport the wizard to top, side, bottom, and middle. Okay. So that's what we'll put within this node. Let's go ahead and populate this node first because it's the simplest, and we'll simply add some sprite 2Ds here. So let's go sprite 2D, and I'm going to just duplicate that well, let's actually not duplicate that yet. Let's first configure this one. Now for the texture on this, I'm just going to create a new gradient texture 2D because we're going to disable these sprites. Are not going to be visible when we're playing. We're just going to use them as placeholders while we're developing the level. So underneath our texture here, let's go to fill and change it to radial. And let's see here, our gradient, I'm actually going to pick a red color, which I like this HSV wheel. It's pretty easy to use. Okay, so we're just going to go red and drag this over and create another one, except this one will drag the alpha all the way off. And I'm going to delete this white one at the end and just click to create a new one and turn this alpha down as well. And what we're creating here is, you'll see, is a ring. Of course, right now it's starting at the top left corner and it's a little bigger than I want. I'm going to change the size real quick to a 32 by 32 pixel texture. And then this fill, we'll just do the from at 0.5 to 1, 0.5. Okay. So then you should end up with this little circle like this. I mean, you don't even have to go that far, but this makes it a little bit obvious that these are positions for the enemy. And that's a quick and easy way to create that. Okay. So I'm going to duplicate this now just 3 times, 1, 2, 3. So we've got our different positions there. And the first two, let's take these first two and let's just drag them. You can eyeball them or you can do it precision, but I'm just going to eyeball it here kind of in the center. And then the second one, I'll just grab this. And this is something we haven't covered a whole lot, but if you click these arrows, it'll restrict you to moving in that axis. So if I click the green arrow, I can just move it straight down. And I'm just going to move it down at the bottom. And then we'll grab these other two and drag them in the middle. And then I'm going to turn off this energy beam because it's distracting me from what the middle might be. I think the middle is actually right about there. I mean, it looks like it should be here, but I don't know. I'm going to just put it, I'm just going to go with my gut. I'm going to put it right there, grab the second one, grab this, and just drag it over. Okay. So now we've got our 4 locations, 1, 2, 3, 4. And I actually want to put these in order: top, right, bottom, left, like that, so that I can iterate through them and I know that that's the order that they're going to be in. Okay, so there's our position targets. And now you could, with this, you know, once we get to the code for this, you'll see if you wanted to put other positions and randomize it, you could. Or if you want to just make it completely random, that would be different code. We're not going to cover that today, but, you know, that would be a really good experiment for those of you who are starting to get the hang of how to write your own GD scripts. You know, maybe randomize where the boss appears if you don't want to do this method. All right. Okay, so now assuming that our boss is kind of here in the middle and then teleports to these spots, what we're going to do is we're going to create a grid of these beam attacks that he will randomly turn on throughout the boss battle. So we don't need to get too much into the weeds about that. But let's go ahead and within our beam attacks folder here, I'm just going to, let's start by taking this energy beam and drag it into beam attacks. I'm going to turn it back on. I'm going to drag this one first so that it's centered with these two circles here. And then I'm going to duplicate that one twice. And I'm going to put one up top, probably about across that piece there, and another one down here at the bottom. Okay. And yeah, you can see, look, my center is a little bit off, isn't it? Let's just go ahead and adjust that. And then let's adjust. I'm going to go ahead and adjust these target positions, which are this side one and this one here. There we go. Okay. So we've got these three beams here now, right? And if I look at them, they're all configured to use a timer. And so if I run this and test this out, they should all fire. Okay. Dang. There we go. They all fired. I'm going to give these a specific name. So let's see. And I want to make sure I order them so that it's easy. Let's put this one at the top. Let's put it first. And I'm going to call this energy beam underscore H1 for horizontal 1. And then this one I'm going to call, in fact, you know what? We could even just call it like EB underscore H2, something like that, right? So that it's nice and abbreviated. And then this last one obviously will be H exclamation. Got to fix that. H3. Okay. So that way it's just kind of easy for me to keep track of. Then later when we get to scripting this, that'll make it easier. So 1 being at the top, 2 in the middle, 3 at the bottom. Okay. And then the next thing that we want to do is I'm going to take these and let's start with the second one here. I'm just going to duplicate this and move it down. And I'm going to call this one V1 for vertical, and we'll just rotate this. So let's just we can come down here to transform and rotate it by 90 degrees. Okay. So that it's like so. Okay. And that one's nice and centered. Of course, we want, let's duplicate that twice. We want V1 to be on the left, somewhere right about here. And then V3 should be to the right, equidistant. So somewhere right about there. Okay. In fact, I'm going to go right there. You notice this one's kind of outside that little line. I like that spacing. Oops. So let's pick V1 and let's just get that right over there. Okay. So there we go. We've got these beam attacks. And just for fun, let's see if we can survive this. I probably won't. I think. Dang it. Dang it. I might need to make that area that damages a little bit smaller. But we're not going to fire those all off like that. So let's select all of these and deselect the use timer. Now if I run it again, they should just be dormant. And then we'll just trigger these through code in our script for our boss. All right. So there we go. Okay, so let's add our sprites to this boss node. So we're not going to be selecting the wizard boss here, but this child, the boss node. And we're going to add a sprite 2D and duplicate that. And I'm going to rename the second one Cloak Sprite. And I guess while we're at it, let's rename this first one the Shadow Sprite. Okay. And you'll notice that these are in the top left corner. We don't want to take these and move them down. What we want to do is take the whole boss node and move that. So I'm going to just move the boss node so that it's somewhere centered like this. And so that our player and our boss aren't spawning in the same place when we test, I'm going to move the player spawn down here. Okay. So if you've got a player spawn, you can go ahead and move that. Now these sprites, let's make our shadow sprite first. That'll be pretty straightforward. We'll just give it we're just going to give it a gradient texture 2D. And let's go like this, come down here, new gradient texture 2D. And let's adjust the gradient. Black here is fine, but let's take this second one and delete it. And then when we click a new one in, it'll be black, and just change the alpha to 0. Okay. And then I'm going to change the size of this sprite to 48 by 24. So we've got this little shape here. And of course we want to change our fill type from linear to radial, and just do the usual 0.5 on the first from X and Y, and then change the Y to 0.5 on the 2, so that we get this shadowy looking thing here. And you can adjust this as you want to, and maybe even adjust the modulate if you want to lighten it. But I think for now, this is good for me. Now this cloak sprite, okay, which is right here, right on top of that, we need to add our boss, the cloak, to it. So if you've got the Dark Wizard sprites, just grab that boss cloak, plop that on there. Okay, so you can see it's got 9 frames. So let's go ahead and set up the animation and say that the horizontal frames are 9. And obviously we do not want this boss cloak to be down like that. So we're going to, while we have the cloak selected, we're just going to drag that up so that it's above the shadow, kind of like that. Now it doesn't have to be exact, but I'm actually just going to set this to -34 because that's a pretty good spot. We'll animate it up and down. So I think that's good. Kind of like the bottom location for it. And then let's go ahead and add a little bit more to this. So right now this boss is kind of dark, and I want to give it a little bit more vibe to this room. So in the boss node, let's add, let's give this guy a point light. So point light 2D. And of course our point light needs a texture. And so let's create a new sprite texture or gradient texture 2D. Some of the same old stuff. On this one, let's make it 256 by 256 pixels. And the gradient, I'm going to change the first stop on this gradient to be kind of like a purple, a bright purpley color. And then just select this one. Oops, select the white one, delete it, click to add a new one. And then we can just change this last stop to be black. Okay. And for some reason, I got something a little bit weird going on here, but it's probably because it's a linear gradient. So let's go down to our fill, change it to radial, 0.5. Okay. You've noticed lately, I'm really loving to use these radial gradients. They're pretty handy, pretty cheap, easy to use. And then with this one, let's just go down to the energy, and I'm going to just say 0.75. So it's not super bright. Okay. And then this wizard sprite is still looking a little bit dark. So let's select it, the cloak sprite, I should say. So what we can do is if we go to the modulate and we click on this raw option, then you'll notice we're at 1 and it's like at the very bottom of the slider, and we can drag this really high, and you see how that makes it kind of bright. We don't really want to overdo this, but I'm going to go ahead and set the red to 2. Okay. And then let's put the green at like 1.25 and the blue at 1.5. So it's kind of a purpley. You can't see it very well. You can see up here, it's on this pink color spectrum, right? Kind of in between. It's kind of, I guess it's red. Okay. And you can see that that kind of brightens up the wizard. So that'll kind of help him stand out a little bit. And I like how that looks. So we're good to go there. And then before we wrap up the cloak sprite, let's go ahead and just add, let's add an animation to our cloak, an animation player. So I'm going to do Control A, animation player. And let's go ahead and make a new animation that we can just call, I don't know, let's call it down. I was going to add one called default, but I don't think we need it. I'm going to make the down animation the one that we autoplay. And all we're going to do with this animation is animate the cloak itself. Okay. So it's going to be very simple. We'll just select the cloak sprite when we're going to click on the frame to add a key here. Go ahead and let it create those reset tracks. And then we'll click 2 more times. And I should have adjusted the timing on this. Maybe. I want to make the duration of this like 0.333 or something like that. Okay, let's zoom in on this guy here. We've got, I only did 2 keyframes. So there's one for 0. And then let's drag one midway here. That should be on key 1. And then right at the end, let's just add a new keyframe, insert key, and set it to frame 2. Okay, and then if we set this to loop and play it, the ping pong loop right here, right? So it goes back and forth. Then we can see how that cloak is animating. I've got this one outside, so it's not playing this last frame, I think. So if we drag this here, let's just set the length to like, there we go, 3, 4. Okay, so there we go. We've got this looping animation for the cloak, and then we'll just duplicate that for the side and the up. So animation, duplicate, call this up. The keyframes for up are at 3, 4, and 5. Oops, that was supposed to be 4. And then if we play that, there we go. There's our up animation, and let's duplicate one more time to make the side. So just like our player, we're just doing the different directions. So 6, 7, and 8 will be the keyframes on this one. Even though it's 9 frames, remember that it's offset because the first frame is at 0. So 8 is the 9th frame. And we've got our side animation, okay? So we'll get into how to use these later. This guy is going to be kind of complicated, so make sure that you're following these steps pretty closely this time because we're going for a very specific outcome. There's not a lot of wiggle room for error on this tutorial. So make sure you've got these things set up and that they're working at this point before you move on. Okay, let's add just a few more items to kind of get some of the base configuration of this boss node complete. I'm going to do Shift-Control-A, and we want to add a hurt box and a hitbox. Okay, so add one of those and add the other. So we've got, oops, not as children of each other like that. So we've got our hurt box, we've got our hitbox, and of course we need to give these, an appropriate collision shape. So let's go ahead and let's do that. I'm gonna add a collision shape 2D here. And let me just get this cloak sprite and let me set this to the down animation. There we go. So that it's a little bit easier to see what we're doing. So this collision shape, I want it to be just a circle shape. And let's come in here and let's just make the radius 13 pixels or so. Okay. So this is the shape, right, where he can do damage if we walk into him. And so let's make this a red color. I'm going to drop the alpha all the way down, and I want to drag this up a little bit so it's kind of in the middle of the body here. Okay, so that if the player's walking around, he can kind of walk around him without hitting him. And then we'll go ahead and leave everything else set as it is here. The damage should be 1. Leave the monitoring on, and make sure you leave the collision. If you are not following along with this whole thing, then we've got a player hurt layer. That's the layer where objects can hurt the player. Okay, so we put that there, and then likewise with the hitbox, let's just add our collision shape 2D here. I'm going to go ahead and make this a circle as well, and let's make this circle larger so he's easier to hit than he is to hit us. So 25 pixels is a pretty good size, I think, for this. And I'm going to drag this up so that it encompasses most of the visible space of the wizard. Something like that maybe. I'm going to make this yellow. Nice bright yellow. Get rid of the alpha. There we go. Okay, so now we've got a hitbox that we can use to damage him. And then let's just add a couple more nodes to get this configured. I'm going to add an audio player 2D. Yeah, audio stream player 2D. And let's go ahead and set this up to have a max polyphony of 2. It doesn't need to be anything special. And if you've got your sound bus set up, make sure this is going to the sound effects channel. And then lastly, let's add an animation player. Okay. And this animation player will be the one that will play most of the boss's primary animations. Okay, now before we're ready to add animations though to this boss, we're missing another element, and that's his hands. And that's complicated, so get this set up here, and then we'll move on to adding the hand sprites for the boss. Okay, so I said the hands are complicated, only slightly so, but still, it's a little bit weird how we're going to do this. So if we look at our cloak sprite, we're going to add the hand as a child of this so that when the cloak moves, the hands kind of go with it. They're going to move and animate a little bit independently as well, but we just want to set them up so that they're easy to use. And what we're going to do here is, so let's go under our cloak, add a sprite 2D, and I'm going to name this first one hand 01. We could do left and right, but that doesn't make a whole lot of sense once you do a facing up and facing sideways. So we'll just do hand 1, and let's go ahead and actually set this up before we go any further. So in our file system, there is a boss hands sprite, and you can see we've got a bunch of different little hands. Okay, so the way to configure this animation settings on this sprite is we've got 16 horizontal frames. Okay, so once you set that, you should see a fist. And I'm going to just drag this sprite until it's kind of in a nice, comfortable position where I think it looks good. So somewhere right below his shoulder there. Okay, so he's going to have these floating hands. You won't see his arms, just his hands. Like maybe he's got gloves on. And the only thing you can see are his clothes. I don't know. That's kind of weird. So maybe he's I won't even say it, but he doesn't have clothes on underneath his cloak. Didn't think about that till now. Let's see. So I'm going to go ahead and just kind of adjust this just a tiny bit. I'm going to just set this to 20. I had it very specifically done, and I want to kind of match it so I know that it looks good. Okay, so this hand here, we can go ahead and duplicate that. And hand 2, right, when we look at the transform, we can just do the opposite on the X, and then we need to flip it. So if we look at the offset here, we can say flip H, and there we go. Okay, so we've got our 2 hands, left and right, or 1 and 2. Okay, now let's go ahead and we're going to duplicate these for each direction. And I know we could probably get away without doing that, but trust me, this seemed like a far easier way to handle it because there's some intricacies that go with animating this guy, and it makes it nice to have them separate. What I'm going to do here is actually just take both of these, Control D to duplicate them, and then hand 3 we'll name hand 01 underscore up, and hand 04 we'll just name that to hand 2 underscore up. Okay, now we're not going to change the frame of these right now. Seems crazy, like why the heck am I even doing it if we're not going to change it? And just bear with me, okay? This will all make sense later. And in fact, what we're going to do with these is we're going to go down in here to the visibility, and there's an option to show behind parent. I'm going to just turn that on, and let's turn off these hands so we can see that. Okay, there we go. So now these hands are behind the wizard. Okay, you're starting to see why this might be easier. These are properties that we can animate, but we're going to just streamline this so we only have to animate one set of hands and not do anything special with the other properties because they gets a little hairy. We'd end up animating far more properties if we didn't do it this way. So that should be good. And then let's go ahead and just duplicate these one more time. So we'll just duplicate these. I'm going to turn off the visibility of those hands. And then let's rename these. So this will be hand 01 side and hand 02 side, like so. Now, in order to see how this is going to work, let's take our cloak sprite animation and let's put this to the side animation. Okay, so we can kind of see what's going on here, right? And we're going to start with hand 01, and we're going to move it to right about here, and just keep that setting that we turned on. So with visibility, we have it showing behind parent. That's good for this one. Then let's take hand 02 and let's turn that off. Okay. And then this one, let's just drag somewhere right around, I don't know, somewhere down here. Okay, so we've got the 2 hands, one's in front and one's behind. Okay, and then I'm just going to go ahead and turn off the visibility of all those, turn on our regular ones again, and set it back to down. So that might seem kind of weird. And yes, there are different ways to do this, but this is how I did it. I mean, I went back and forth on these hands a couple ways, and this seemed easier to me, so I hope that the solution makes sense to you. But before we get there, just to let you know, what we'll do is through code, we're just going to enable the correct hands a little bit. We'll do some animating of the hands. The other hands will copy some of those same animated properties, but that we won't have to create separate animations for each of them. So they'll be able to do things like, you know, the hands open and close and do things like that when the boss is casting his spells or whatnot. Okay. All right, so let's take a look at this boss and this animation player that we've got here, and let's set up the basic animations that we're going to need to run through the boss in his various states. Let's begin by creating an idle animation. So we'll just say new animation, we'll call it idle. So this will be the animation that plays during the idle phase or idle state of this boss. And let's start by selecting our cloak sprite. So with the cloak sprite, we're going to want to keyframe the position. Okay, because we're going to animate the position of this. And let's go ahead and set up I'm going to change the snap settings on this animation to 0.1. And a duration of 1 second will be good for this idle animation. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with the position just where it is on keyframe 0. And then we'll go to half a second, 0.5, and I'm going to go ahead and insert a new keyframe. And I'm just going to go in here and manually type in a -40 for the Y value on that. So if we drag the playhead, you can see he's going to hover up, and then we'll just have it go back down. So we can go to this last frame, select the first one, and say duplicate keys, or copy and paste. There we go. So now if we play that, we've got up and down. In order to make that look a little bit nicer though, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to select all 3 of these keyframes. And in the ease here, I'm going to just right click and I'm going to choose ease in out. Okay, so now when we play back, it's a little bit smoother. Of course, in our game, if we go ahead and run this, and let's set this idle to the animation that automatically plays. Okay, so it plays once. It's not quite as smooth as this preview in here, but that's because we're going from a high res to a limited lower resolution for the pixel art. So the animations get a little bit less smooth when you do that, but you know, that's just kind of the price we pay for setting our resolution low. Going back to our animation, I want to go ahead and I want to select this boss node, and I'm going to go ahead and, even though we're not going to do anything with it here, I want to come in and keyframe the modulate, because eventually we're going to modulate this, and we're going to modulate the boss node so that it modulates all of the children nodes as well. Okay, but we just want it to stay white here. But that way, when we do that, we've set up the reset keyframe here, and we've ensured that if we ever enter the idle animation and the modulate was off or something different, that it'll come back to this default value. And then let's go to our hands, and we're going to select, and let's see, let's go, where are they? They're underneath the cloak sprite. So find just the default ones. So hand 1, I'm going to select that, and I'm going to put a key on the frame. Okay, so it's the closed fist, and we're going to leave it there. And then I also want to come over here, and I want to put a keyframe on the position, create that. And then we're going to come to 0.5 as well, and we'll create a new keyframe. Okay, so then here what we'll do is I'm going to set the Y to 7, and then we'll just copy this first keyframe, go to the end, and paste it. So now you can see that the hand is going to kind of bob. And let me just turn on looping so that we can see how this looks nicely. But there you go. The hand is kind of bobbing opposite the body. And I'm going to go ahead and select these while this is playing, and right click on the easing, set that to ease in out, so we get that same smooth animation. Okay. And then we'll do the same thing with the left hand. So let's see, hand 2. I'm going to go ahead and just find, let's see, where's the animation? Put a key for the frame. And I don't know where I put that. Let's go ahead and stop this animation so that we're not getting out of sync here. And then again, we'll select a hand 2, go down to position, set a key, go to frame half a second, insert a key there, set this to 7, copy and paste that first keyframe, and then again we'll just select these, all 3 of them, right click, set it to ease in out. There we go. So there's our standard idle animation that will play when the boss is just idling, and we're only going to play that one time by default normally. So I'm going to turn off the looping, so it'll just play once. Okay, and that's all we need to do for this idle animation. So I'm going to go ahead and save. Next, I want to create an animation that we call Dissapear. So this is when the enemy is moving from one spot to another. Before he teleports, he'll disappear. Okay. So let's just take this idle animation and duplicate it, and we'll call it D-I-S-A 2 P's, Dissapear. I don't know. I think that's right. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and change the animation length here to 0.6 seconds, and we'll keep the snapping at 0.1. Okay. So let's go ahead and just grab these keyframes and move them all in so that we don't have any keyframes outside of the animation. Okay. And that's not what we want the animation to do. Just check it to make sure it works. Okay. So we're going to take our position. We do want to start at the bottom because we'll play like idle and then something, and then we'll always come back to this bottom position that we're at right here with the cloak before we do the next animation. So we can start with that keyframe there. And then I'm just going to take this first key and drag it to 0.1 seconds. And I'm going to set this value to -30. Okay. And then we'll take this other value over here, the last keyframe, and we'll keep that. And we're going to set it to -48. So now the position is going to animate like that. Okay. He's going to kind of whoop, bounce down and then float up. And then while he's doing that, we're also going to use this modulate keyframe. So we'll just, I'm going to copy this and paste it here. He'll stay full, regular modulate. And then what we'll do is we'll go to the last keyframe, paste it again, and let's select this value and just drag the alpha all the way down to 0. So now when we play this animation back, he just kind of fades out. Okay. And I actually kind of like, I'm just going to keep the hands doing what they're doing, right like that. Okay. Except maybe we can come in here and grab hand 1 and change the frame and just make it like the open and go ahead and key that. Let's see how that looks. Okay, we'll go ahead and do the same down here. Just set the keyframe to, what was that, 2? Okay. Actually, I kind of don't want that on 2. I kind of want it on maybe the 1. Yeah, I like that better. Okay, so he's going to disappear. And then let's duplicate this animation and we'll call it reappear, or we could just even call that appear. I don't know. Let's go ahead and rename that to just appear. Get rid of the re. Okay, simplify that a little bit. And then what we want to do with the appear is I'm going to come up here and we're just going to grab these keyframes and we can reverse them. In fact, let's see if this works. Go here and say scale selection and set this to -1. Okay, there we go. And we'll want to do the same thing actually with probably all of these. So let me just drag this a little bit bigger. Scale selection, -1. Okay. So now if we look at this animation and play it back, except what we need to do is with the hand, we need to put the open keyframe kind of up here, and then we can put the fist there. In fact, I'm going to do something else. I'm going to come right in here, insert a key, set this to the open hand. Okay, so that's keyframe 2. And actually, yeah, that might look good reversed if we keep the hand open and then it kind of closes. Okay, so there we go. We've got our appear animation. Okay, 3 animations down. We just need to do a couple more. We're going to have one that we call cast spell. So I'm going to go back to the idle animation. I want to duplicate this one. Cast_spell. Okay, and then this animation is going to be longer, 3 seconds, because we want him to animate a little bit to signal to the player that something's about to happen. And then when we come in here, we'll let me just zoom out on this timeline so I can see more of it. So what we'll do is on our position, we'll leave it we'll leave the default here at -34. Okay, and I'm going to actually come in to about ½ a second, and I'm going to go ahead and copy that. And I think, yeah, if we have that selected and do Control D, it'll duplicate it. Okay, so we've just got it holding that keyframe for ½ a second. And then the next keyframe I want is at the 2-second mark. And I'm going to drag this one here out to the 3-second mark. And what we want on this 2-second mark is I'm going to set this to -30. So what's going to happen is he's going to go down just a little bit, just a couple keyframes later. So like at maybe 2.2 or so, I'm going to just go ahead and insert a keyframe. And this one, we're going to make -38. Okay, so let's see. Yeah, and then he'll just slowly come back down. But let's go ahead and select this and set the easing to ease in out so it matches. So now if I play that, you can see that the wizard is kind of slowly crouching down and then he's going to pop up, right? And that'll be the moment at which the spell is cast. Boom, and then he'll kind of settle back down, okay? And so let's go ahead and update the hands for this one. And actually, before we do the hands, let's do the modulate. So I'm going to just take this modulate. I'm going to kind of do the same thing. Duplicate this keyframe here at 0.5 seconds, and then come right up here to where he's about to cast the spell. And we're going to take this modulate, and we're going to change the color. Okay, so let's bump this value to 2. And then I'm going to drop the green down. And then I'll put this maybe at 1.2. Okay, so he's going to kind of get brighter, right? It's like he's charging up. And then once he does that move up here, we can kind of just revert back to normal. Okay, so he'll get bright and then he'll fire off the ability and he'll dim off. And then we're good to go. Okay. Now, likewise with the hands, we need to do a little bit of animation with the hands. Okay, and they'll start in a closed fist. Let's go ahead and animate the movement of the hands first, the position, and then we'll animate the keyframe that the hands play through. So we'll start them at this default down keyframe. So that's going to be X on the 20 on the X and then 4 on the Y. And then we're not going to move the hands until we get closer to, you know, these keyframes over here. So I'm going to say let's go to about 1.8. And let's drag this first keyframe there. And I'll drag this one out. Okay, so this first keyframe, we're not going to ever change the X on these ones. We're only going to change the Y. I'm going to set this to -11. So what's going to happen is the hand's going to go up. And then we're going to make it go back down when he's casting the spell. So we'll go just to back to our, well, we'll go to maybe 7 or so. And we'll do that right about here. Okay, so we'll say, set that to 7. So the hand's going to go up and then it's going to come back down. And then we can hold that keyframe just for a little bit. And then we'll go back up here. We'll go to 2.6, select this keyframe, and I'm going to select the first one and duplicate that so that it gets back to its resting position. Okay. So now the hand goes up and then down, kind of opposite of how the wizard is going. And so let's go ahead and copy these. Well, we can't copy them exactly, can we? So we'll do the work manually. Got these keyframes here. So this one, actually this one can go right here just as is and duplicate that. Really all we need to set is this keyframe right here. And what was that value that put us at? -11. -11. Change this easing type. Okay, so if I got that right, they should move in tandem now. Okay, cool. So now let's animate the hand. The frames of the hand, and at 1.7, right before the hand starts to gets to its peak, we're going to come in here and we're going to insert a key and just set that to the first frame. Okay, so it starts to open, and then we'll drag it over to, I don't know, maybe just 1 frame or 2 frames right here. Insert another key on both of these and just pop that up 1 frame so that it's the open hand. And then right after they start to go down, which, let me look at this. I think I'm getting this a little bit out of whack here. I'm going to just scoot these back. So these ones are at 1.6 and these ones are at 1.9. Yeah, that seems pretty good. Then right here at about 2.1, let's insert another key. I wonder if I can do these at the same time. I think I can. 3. Yeah, there we go. See, then his hands go down like he's casting a spell. And then right here where things start to settle down again, we'll just insert 2 more keyframes and set this back. Well, here, we don't want to go all the way back to the close. We'll go to the closing fist, and then we'll go 2 more notches, right? And then we'll select these and set it to 0. Okay. Hopefully we follow along there, but his hands are going to go up, do the cast animation, and then close up again. Okay, so that's our spell casting animation. So it kind of incorporates a couple things like this color change. So we've got, well, what do we got here? We've got our appear, cast, spell, disappear, and idle. And then really we just need one more, which is the destroy animation. And so let's go ahead and create that. Let's see. Let's go back to our default, or the idle. That's a good one. And I'll just go ahead and duplicate this. We'll call it destroy. And I want this animation to be a little bit longer. It'll be 4 seconds. We can keep the snapping at 0.1, and we'll go ahead and keep this first position again for the cloak sprite. And we're going to drag this same -40 position to 1 second. And then this other one here, this other keyframe, we're going to keep the position. We'll just drag it to roughly 3 seconds, maybe 2.9. Okay. So he's going to do like a slow up and down. And then we'll go to the boss node modulate, and right here, kind of at his peak, I'm going to go ahead and insert a key, and we're going to brighten this up. So I'm going to just put this at 3, 2, 2, I think. Okay, so he should brighten up quite a bit like that. And then we'll go from here to where he settles back down. We're going to take this same color. We're going to blend the alpha. And in fact, I'll probably set these back to 1, 1, 1, 1. Okay, so he'll get bright and then he'll fade out. Okay. And let's go ahead and animate the hands. So we've got 4, 7, 4. I'm going to take these last ones and let's change the value to -8 on both of those. And then these are all kind of, I think these other keyframes are good. I'm just going to drag them into like 0.2 seconds and then maybe put these at 0.8 seconds. So his hands are going to kind of just go up like that. They're going to bounce down and then up. Okay. And then what we can do is we'll make them open up. So right at like go to keyframe 0.6 or so, insert some keys, and we'll just put these keyframe 1. And then right here, when they get to the top, we'll insert keys again and set them to the open hand. Okay, so he's going to go, whoa, and then just fade out. Now, while he's doing this, we're going to do a little bit more. Right now, we're just going to add an audio, and then later we'll come back and we'll add some explosions to it. But let's see here. So let's create a track for audio playback, and we need to select our audio stream player that's nested under the boss node. Okay. And then the audio clip that we want in here, if we go to our file system, you've got the audio in here, and there is a boss destroy. So just drag that over to your animation player and plop it in, and we'll just drag it right to the first frame, and it should sound like this. Okay. Kind of fun. Okay, so this is coming along. There's one last thing that I want to set up here on our boss node. I'm going to do Shift-Control-A and add one of our persistent data handler nodes. So I'm going to drag this to the top so I remember it's here. This node, we're just going to reference it in the boss script, but it has code built into it so that we can save data with it, and it kind of handles the save data code. It's very simple. Just as a reminder, here's the script. And we just have a value if it's true or false and a signal when the data is loaded. And, when it is created or instantiated, we get the value and we emit that. And we can also save it by saying set value. Works just like that. So we'll use this to save like when the boss has been defeated. Okay. But we don't need to do anything important with this at this point. Now, before we move on, though, I just want to test this scene. And what we should see is our boss. There he is, floating in the middle, and his light's working on the player. Make sure that I can go in front and behind him, and that's working good. If I walk close, he'll damage me. He does 1 damage, which is half a heart for my game. Okay, and of course he does have. We can hurt him, but we haven't hooked those boxes to any script or given him hit points, so that doesn't do anything just yet. But if you've gotten this far and your project is working and running just like mine, then we're ready for the next steps. Now, it should come as no surprise to you that the boss script on this is going to be pretty involved, okay? It's not going to be too daunting, but it's going to take us some time to get through it. And it's probably going to be one of the longer scripts we've built in any of my video series. But let's go ahead and go to our file system and find that Dark Wizard folder. We've got a script folder. So just navigate here and let's go ahead and add a script. New script. And we'll call this Dark Wizard Boss. Okay. And let's go ahead and just plop that onto our root Dark Wizard Boss node right here. Okay. I'm not putting it on the boss node. I'm putting it on here. So what we've got laid out now is we've got this node that contains these children, right? Different things. It's got some beam attacks. It's got position targets. It's got a boss node, which the boss node contains the boss and the light and the hands and all that. We can move it around separately. And this one script is just going to control them all. Okay. So let's go ahead and open that script and let's get it started. And I want to give this a class name. And we'll just call it just like the script name, Dark Wizard Boss. And it should extend to node 2D because that's what we put it on and that's what we're going to use. There's going to be a lot that goes into this. So we'll take this one step at a time. But before we do that, let's set up a couple of the values that we know we're going to want. Okay. So in here, let's do this. Let's export a variable for our hit points. We'll call this max HP. Okay. This is an integer and we'll set it equal. I'm going to set it equal to 10. And for purposes, we made it an export variable so we can adjust this. So when we're testing, we can drop it to like 1 and kill them in one hit and stuff like that. And then let's make another variable that's hit point. We're not going to export this one. Okay. And I'll set it to 10 as well by default. And how that works is obviously we've got a max hit points and then we've got a hit points. It's useful to keep those separate so that we can tell later on when we want to add like something like a health bar to the boss, we'll know how much health has been depleted. And that's useful. Otherwise, you could just have an HP value and just decrease it. But we're going to start with that. And then we're going to have to build this out step by step, right? Because we need to do a couple things here. We need to track the positions that we've got on that scene. If we look here, we've got those 4 dots. Track them and be able to move the boss through them. So the boss, what we're going to create is he's going to be able to be idle, and then he's going to be able to cast a spell, which will be the energy beams. And then he also needs to have like a disappear and a reappear animation so that he can teleport. He'll disappear and then he'll move to a new spot and reappear. And then this code is going to be able to kind of iterate through those animations. Okay, so he's going to be fairly animation based, even though it's script heavy. We're also going to make it so that at a certain point, once he teleports, he'll fire one of these energy balls that we've created, and that'll fly at the enemy, or I mean at the player, excuse me. And last but not least, we'll make it so that he can be destroyed, and we'll have an animation and a kind of a state for that. We're going to have a rough state machine kind of thing built into this boss script. It's all going to be self-contained in this script, however. Okay, so why don't we begin with our positions, and we'll do that as the first thing that we really begin to track here. So let's just make some more variables. We'll have a variable. We want to track his current position. And this isn't actually tracking his actual, in the world position, but we're going to track it like the index. So of the 4, is he on position 0, 1, 2, or 3? That's what we're going to use this for. Okay. So we could rename it to current position index if you wanted to. I'm just going to leave it here as current position. And by default, we'll set that to 0. Then let's also have another variable that we call positions. Okay, now this is actually an array, and it's going to be an array that contains a set of vector2 variables. Okay, so for each of those little spots, we'll get the location, the position of those. Okay, so you can see how this current position index will relate to a position in this array. Then let's also go ahead and kind of populate this. So let's go down to our ready function. Okay, and in here, let's go ahead and populate this positions array. So let's do it like this. We'll say for C in, and I'm kind of going to do this the quote unquote lazy way. Since we're only going to be accessing this position targets once, I'm just going to grab it here. Oops, just click and drag. Don't hold any button. So we'll just say get PositionTargets.get children. Okay. So we're going to just access this, grab all the children, iterate through them. Pretty common thing that we do in my tutorials. And we're going to append each of the locations of each of these to our positions array. So we'll say positions.append. And then the value that we're going to append is not the child itself, but it's going to be the global position of the child. Okay, so we'll say c.global position, and that'll give us that vector2 of where that object is located. And then the very next thing we'll do is, after we've iterated through those, is we're just going to go and I guess I lied. We're going to access this guy twice. We'll say position targets dot visible equals false. We could even queue free it, I suppose, but we'll go ahead and keep it here in case for some reason in your code you want to refer back to those. But there we go. What we've done here is collected those, and then we're going to just hide them. And just to make sure this is working, let's go ahead and do this. Let's go ahead and print each position. So we'll just say c.global. Actually, let's do this. We can do this outside of the for loop. Let's just say print, and then we'll say positions. So this should tell us if we've actually gathered them, right? So let's go ahead and run this scene. Got our wizard there. Everything's working. You'll notice now that those dots are hidden, which is good. Okay. And then if we look over here in the console, I'm gonna go ahead and just minimize this. You can see in the console, we've got 4 values that were printed here. So these correspond with the locations and positions of each of those sprite 2Ds. Okay. So that's working. Go ahead and stop our game, and one step down of many. All right, so let's go ahead and continue, and hopefully I can keep this flowing in a way that makes sense, but because there's a lot to do here. But let's set up a few more things in our ready function. One obvious thing that we need to do is we've got our max HP and HP values. So let's go ahead and initialize those properly. So the HP should always equal the max HP when the boss battle begins. And so, you know, if we go into come in here and look at our boss, and we adjust his max hit points down to 4 or 3, right? Then when the game runs, it'll set the HP accordingly. Okay, so just a simple little thing there. And then I want to go ahead and actually grab a few things. So we've got a lot of different pieces of this boss that we're going to need to grab and have access to. Let's go ahead and get a couple of them right now that we're going to use pretty soon here. Obviously, we've got an animation player. So I'm going to hold and then press Control to drag and drop that in there. We also want to get this audio stream player 2D. And I'm going to just rename this to audio. Okay. I want this boss node. We're going to have a reference to that because we're going to have to move it around. I want to get a reference to the persistent data handler. And actually, I just noticed before we drag that in there, look at this. I put it as a child of the boss node. Doesn't make a huge difference, but I'm going to drag it and make it a child of the dark wizard boss. Okay, there we go. So we've got our persistent data handler. We know we need that. We've got our hurt box and hit box. We want a reference to both of those because we're going to have to reference those. So let's drag that in there. And for now, let's stop here and let's do some work. We're going to end up coming back and adding more variables and things like that to this script, but this is a lot to begin with. So I think the first thing we can do, or the next thing I should say that we can do in our onready, is let's go ahead and connect our hitbox damaged signal. We'll connect to that. So I should have a signal called damaged. Okay. And let's just go ahead and look at this hitbox as a reminder of, oh, did I not drag the hitbox in? I did not. There we go. So if we look at this hitbox script, anytime it takes damage, it's just going to emit the hurt box that damaged it with this signal here. Okay. So that's what we're connecting to. So we're going to need to create a function to handle that, and we'll call it damage taken. And let's go ahead down here, somewhere below our process function. Let's just add that function. And this does, if you recall where we were just looking, this damage taken signal does emit the hurt box. So I'm going to go ahead and just define that argument here. It's a hurt box of type hurt box. And this function does not need to return any value, so we'll just say void. And let's go ahead and actually test this out. Let's just say print, and we'll just say boss damaged for now. And if we've hooked this up properly, then it should already be able to output that message. So I'm going to go ahead and run the game. Yeah, you can see it output a couple times the boomerang and a couple little attacks. So, okay, so that little damage taken script is working. Let's go ahead and actually update this and do a little bit more. The basic thing that we want to do here is just update the hit points. So we're going to use the clamp integer function here because this is just a simple way in my mind to do the subtraction and limit the hit points to be arranged between 0 and the max HP, all in one line of code. So within this clamp integer, the integer we're going to pass in is the HP minus the hurt box dot damage. Okay, so that's going to be the damage value of the hurt box. And then, of course, we have to provide a minimum and a maximum for this clamp integer function. So the minimum will be 0 and the maximum will be max HP. Okay, so whatever number we get out of this little equation will not be lower than 0 or higher than that. And obviously it's only ever going to go down if the player's attacking him, but you know, maybe you built some way that you could actually heal the boss. Would be really mean. Like maybe your main attack heals the boss and you got to hit him with fire or something like that. Idea for another time. So there we go. And then let's do this for right now. We're going to add more to this damage taken, but let's just go ahead and do a check. We'll just say if hit points is less than 1, you know, or you could say equal to 0, then what we want to do here is for now we're going to print a message and just say boss defeated. Okay. And if we look at the boss node or the Dark Wizard boss, we set him to 3 hit points. So we should get that boss defeated once we've hit him 3 times. So let's go ahead and just test to make sure that this code is working. And I'm going to drag this to the side so we can see. Okay. Ready? 1, 2, 3. There we go. Boss defeated. Okay. Obviously, we need some feedback for when we're damaging the boss. And this is actually something we're going to go back to our boss scene. When we set this up, right, in this boss node, we only added 1 animation player. We could make the damage animation a part of all of these animations, but I want the animation that damages the boss to be separate from these ones so that we're not overriding variables and running into weird issues. So what we're going to do is add a second animation player here. So Control A, animation player, and this one we'll call animation player underscore damaged. Okay, we're only going to use it for that 1 animation. And here's what we'll do. We'll come in here, we'll create a new animation. We'll call it damaged. And then actually, let's make another one too. Let's make one more. I'm going to say another new animation and we'll just call it default. And this is just so that we have an animation to play when we start. I'm going to start this one by default. And all we really want to do is click our cloak sprite. Okay, so in this default, we'll just come down here to self-modulate and we'll just add a keyframe. Okay, so by default, the self-modulate is set. And then we'll come to our damaged and we'll add a keyframe for self-modulate. Same thing. But this one we're actually going to animate. So 1 second for the animation is actually a good length. And let's just change our snapping to an interval of 0.1. So right here, let's insert a key. And we'll actually keep this one. Let's go to this first keyframe actually, and we'll just say, I'm going to boost the red up to 3 and maybe the green to 2 and the blue to 1.5. And again, you got to be on the raw values to be able to do those kind of numbers there. And now this second keyframe, we can leave it as white. And then let's just go over here to 0.2 and we'll insert another key. And this one, we're going to change the alpha to 0. Okay. And then I'm going to just select both of these, zoom into my timeline just a little bit here. That looks nice. And I'm going to go to 0.3 and paste, and then 0.5 and paste, 7 and 9. Except this last transparent keyframe we don't need. So then the animation will look like that. Okay. Now the hands aren't going to blink, but I'm not too worried about that. If you wanted to, we could go reconfigure how this happens. And we could kind of use self-modulate to brighten this up and then maybe animate the modulate so that the hands and the children get blink with the cloak. Just decide how you want to do it. I guess I'm just okay with it as is. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and save that. And then when we go back to our script, let's go up here where we have our imports and we have the animation player. We need to bring in this other animation player, the one for our damaged animation. Okay, so then when we come down here in our take damage script, we want to hook up to that animation. I'm actually going to do something here. Well, first let's start with playing this animation. So assuming that he can take damage, right? Because we're going to add a condition in here where he might not be able to take damage. So we'll just say animation player. I'm not typing very well today, but that's pretty par for the course for me. Okay, so animation player damage dot play, and then here we just want to play the damaged animation. Okay, and then just to be safe, I do want to seek to the first keyframe because there's always a possibility that maybe we were already playing this animation. And actually we'll probably remove that, but for now we'll do that, seek to 0. And then this is a feature or a function that we haven't used in our animation player before, but animation players have a queue function. And what the queue will do is it will allow us to queue up the next animation it plays, so we can just play the default after we play the damaged animation. Okay, so that's just going to queue that up in the animation player. And there we go. And then we do our check to see if he should die. And if he does, we'll handle that down here. Okay, but we'll get to that later. So for now, we should actually play this damaged animation. Let's go ahead and test that. Okay, there we go. He blinks. Now the problem is I don't want to be able to continuously damage the boss. That would make him a little bit weak and wimpy. So it's kind of like the player has those invulnerable frames after he takes damage. Let's do the same thing to the boss. And the really simple way to do that is to add an if statement. And we'll just say when damage should be taken if the animation player is playing, if the current animation equals damaged, meaning it's playing the damaged animation, right? Then we can just return and not damage the boss. And there's actually another condition I want to add in here, and that's that if a hurt box damage value is equal to 0, because when we're charging our sword, I don't know if you guys realize this or remember this, and if you weren't following along, you didn't catch this, but when we charge the sword, we stick a little damage box in front of the player so you can kind of poke people around, but it does 0 damage. Okay, and so we don't want that to damage the boss and then you do your spin attack and you're not able to hurt him. So we'll add this condition in here. If he gets hit by your little charging sword, it's not going to do anything. Okay, and then we also want to play an audio file. Okay, so let's just make a function to play audio. Func play audio. And I just want to pass in an audio stream to this. And it doesn't need to return anything, so void. And before we can do that, let's see, we have our audio stream player reference, but let's go ahead and add some variables. Now we could make these export variables. I'm going to go ahead and just make them a regular variable and hard code them for now. So we need an audio for hurt. Okay, and this is an audio stream. And then we're going to use this preload to just preload this file so that it's ready for our script. And then what we want to look for is there is a sound effect called boss hurt. So if I start typing boss hurt, you can see, there we go, boss hurt.wave. I'm just going to go ahead and select that and hit enter. There we go. We've got an audio for our hurt. And I'm kind of going a little bit out of order here, aren't I? But in our play audio, all we need to do is grab our audio node and just set the stream to whatever's passed in. So this is going to equal A. And then we'll call the play function on that. So we'll say audio.play. And we're good to go. And then right up in here where we damage the boss, we can call our play audio function and just pass in the what was the audio underscore hurt? Is that what I called it? Yep, there we go. Okay, Now, another thing we could potentially want to do here would be like update boss health bar, which we don't have one right now, and we'll build one in the future. But for now, we can just make a little note that that's what we want to do right there. And we're good to go. So I'm going to just go ahead and run this one more time. So now when our boss takes damage, okay, we've got a sound effect, and you'll notice I can't continue to damage him until he's done blinking, right? That'll make it so that we can't just spam hit the boss. Okay, so there we go. We've got our basic damage taken set up. We've got a little play audio function that we can reuse. So we're making some good progress. All right, so now that we've come this far, I want to kind of wrap up, or at least not completely wrap up, but kind of put a defeat condition in here and a function so that the boss can be killed. Then we'll know that that works, and we can finish that death animation with some explosions. So let's go ahead and do that now. So what we'll do is once the HP is less than 1, we'll call a function that we'll call defeat. So let's just go ahead and copy that and come down to the bottom of our script and add our defeat function. Okay, and obviously what this needs to do is just tell the boss that he's dead and maybe set some things and play the appropriate animation. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's come in here, and the first thing we can do is call our animation player and tell it to play the destroy animation. Okay. And I also want to disable all the hitboxes on the boss so that the player can't walk into him and take damage even after the boss dies. And in order to do that, actually, I want to make a new function because we're gonna have to enable and disable his hitboxes when he teleports as well. So let's create a function called enable hitboxes, just like that. And what we're going to do is we're going to give this an optional parameter. So by default that you're enabling it, right? So I'm just going to say _v for value of type Boolean, and by default that equals true. So if you just call enable hitboxes, it's going to enable them. Okay, and this does not need to return anything. And then what we'll do is we'll say hitbox dot monitorable equals false. Okay, so the hitbox, the one that is damaging the player, will not be looking for the player, but also we want to take our hurtbox and set its monitoring value equal to false. And actually, we don't want to do false or flays, my favorite version of false. We actually want to use this value, okay? I don't know why I was saying false. I'm just thinking in my brain. Okay, so when we call this function, we're going to set these to whatever we pass in, which obviously enabling is setting them to true. The reason I was thinking false is because here in our defeat, when we call this, we're going to call enable hit boxes, but we're actually going to pass in false. That's why I kept saying false in my brain. Okay, and the reason we do that again is so that once the boss is destroyed, the player can walk through him without taking damage, and he will no longer be able to deal damage to the boss. Okay, and thus putting him back into the take damage state. And then we actually have our persistent data handler. I want to go ahead and access that here. We'll just say set value, because essentially what this data handler is going to track is if the boss has been defeated or not. Okay, so we'll go ahead and set the value to true. And then we're going to await for our animation player to finish. Animation player dot animation finished. And then what we're going to do here is we haven't done this yet, so we'll do this in a second, but we're going to reopen the room because I want to close off the door to the room. So once the player enters to fight the boss, the door gets sealed. Okay, so we'll do that later once we set that up. Okay, so now we've got a defeat condition. It's going to play this destroy animation, and let's go ahead and just test that real quick. It should just take 3 hits and then he should destroy. There we go. Okay, and you'll notice I can walk through and I don't take damage. Let's just go ahead and spice up that destroy animation, and let's make sure that these bugs are just this. Oh, this is a real bug actually. Enable hitboxes function block during in-out signal. So I guess what we need to do is here we need to use set deferred. So let's go set deferred. And then once we do the set deferred, we have to use the string name of the property we want to set and then the value. I think that's how we do it. like this. Let's see if that, yeah, that looks good. Okay. So that one we're doing monitorable. I'm going to just go ahead and copy this and come down here. But note that we're actually setting the monitoring on this one. So I got to come in here and change it from monitorable to monitoring. Okay, let's just test that again real quick and make sure this still works. Okay, there we go. No error that time. I'm not sure why I didn't see that error in my previous testing, but you know, never hurts to find something while we're working on it. Okay, so what I was saying is let's go ahead and set up these explosion animations. And how I'd like to do this is I'm going to just make a component that just is an explosion that just plays, so we can just plop it in and it'll play over top of the boss. Okay, so in order to do that, I'm going to go into the file system and just navigate down here. So we've got our Dark Wizard folder, and I'm going to go ahead and add a new scene, and we will call it energy_explosion. Okay, there we go. Let's go ahead and go to the 2D view for that. Now, this energy explosion scene can actually be a sprite 2D, so let's go ahead and change the type to a sprite 2D. And I'm going to come down here to visibility, or maybe ordering. I think visibility is fine. Let's go to ordering. I want to give this a z-index of 1 before we even get going on this, so that this is always on top. Okay. And so what this energy explosion needs, in addition to the sprite itself, obviously, we just want to add an animation player. Okay. And that'll be all we really need. So let's select our energy explosion. And in our Dark Wizard folder, let's go into sprites and just find, where is it? Energy explosion.png. You'll have this sprite here, right? Which, as you can see, should have 8 frames if I'm remembering correctly. So let's go ahead and set the animation horizontal frames to 8. Okay, and by default we're on frame 0. And go ahead and save this. Now let's work on our animations for this. Let's create just a new animation, and we can call it, I mean, you can call it almost anything you want. I'm going to just call it explode. And 1 second is appropriate. I'm going to set the snapping to 0.1. Okay. And all we're going to do is let's select our sprite here, and let's start by keying the frame. And then I'll just click through. Okay, yeah, we don't need those last 2. When you get that line, that means that there's no change in between the frames. Okay, so that's the last part of it. Boom. So there we go. We've got a little explosion. Okay. Now you could add a sound effect here, but any place we're going to use this currently, we're already going to have a sound effect kind of behind it. So we don't need to add a sound effect, I don't think, on this one. So if you wanted to, you could add an audio stream player and play that as well. Now what we're going to do with this, because we're going to instantiate this scene whenever we want an explosion, and then we want that scene to just delete itself. So we can come in here to the animation player, and I'm going to add a track and call method track. And we're going to call method on the energy explosion. I'll say okay. And then let's see, we need a key like right at 0.8 seconds maybe. And the key, what we can do with this call function, I don't think we've used this much, but we can call any function on the node, or if it has an attached script, that would show up here as well. But in this case, we just want to use the node's queue_free function. So if I start typing queue, you can see, did I type that wrong? Oh, no, there it is, right under node. See this void queue_free? So this is the function that we call when we want a node to be removed from the scene tree. So I'll just go ahead and use that. Okay. So then what will happen is this animation will play, and the animation player will call that function right over here and just delete the animation from, or the whole node from the scene tree. Okay. So how are we going to do that? Let's come back here. We're going to go to our script for our Dark Wizard boss. And let's go ahead and go up to the top. And before we have our export variables and whatnot up here, let's just get a reference to that scene. So we're going to call this our energy explosion scene. And I'm keeping this all caps because it's going to be a packed scene reference, right? This constant variable is not something we will manipulate directly. Okay, instead we'll use it to make copies of the scene. So this is a type packed scene, and it equals, and we just type preload because we need to load this before the script is ready. And what we want is our energy explosion scene. So, well, but didn't find it when I started typing it. What we can also do is go to our file system. If I delete these quotes, and we can find the scene here, energy explosion, and just click and drag that. There we go. That'll pop the reference in. Okay, so now we've got this energy explosion scene, and we're going to make a function. So let's just go to the bottom here, and we're going to create a new function called explosion. Okay, now what we'll do with this explosion function is we're going to declare a new variable, E, and it's going to be just a node 2D. I don't really care. It's actually going to be a sprite 2D because we're going to instantiate one of these explosion scenes, but that's not really important because those all inherit a node 2D, and we just need to be able to position it. So we'll just say this is one of these energy explosion scene instances. So we'll say .instantiate, okay, to create a new instance of that explosion scene. And then we're going to put what we want to do is we want to be able to position this explosion. So let's go ahead and provide a location here as an argument for this function. So we'll just call it _p, and this will be a vector2. And by default, we'll set it equal to vector2.0 so that we could call this without passing a position if we need to. And then here we'll just get our E that we created, and we'll say the global position. We want that, we're going to position this in global space. And what we're going to actually do is we're going to set it equal to the boss node position. So wherever the boss is on the screen when he dies, we're going to get his global position and add this offset that we'll call P. So +_P, just like that. And then we need to add this. We just need to add it to the scene. So we'll say get parent. Otherwise it's going to be floating in the Godot ether. I don't know what it does if we don't add it to the scene. We'll just get the parent. And when we're calling get parent, we're calling this on our dark wizard, or dark wizard boss. So it's just going to add it to the level. Okay. So we'll just say add _child. And we want to call deferred on this one because we're going to be calling this in the animation player and stuff like that. So I don't know. I think we need to use call deferred. And there we go. So we're getting our parent. We're doing add child, call deferred, meaning we'll just do it the next available process and add it. So there we go. So this function should allow us to add explosions, but obviously we haven't called that function anywhere. And we're going to go into our animation player actually, and we're going to call it there. So this is maybe a little bit goofy, but it's actually kind of a cool thing. So if we go to our destroy animation and let's add a new track, and we'll do a call method track just like we did with the explosion. Okay. Except this time we're going to call a method on our dark wizard boss. Okay. Because that's where the script resides. Okay, so then what we can do here is kind of in time with some of these explosion sounds, some way, somehow. Like I'm going to start at 0.2 seconds actually. Let's just insert a key. And then what we want to do is you can see the script methods. We've got these script methods here are the methods on the script attached to the dark wizard. So that's our dark wizard boss script. So there is the explosion function here. I'm going to go ahead and say open on that. And actually, if we come in here, you can see this arguments. It's got an argument count of 1. It recognizes that. So it's of type vector2. So we can actually provide a position, and this is going to act as an offset. It's going to move where that explosion is. And we don't want all of these to be 0, 0 right on top of the center of the boss. We want to offset them a little bit. So on this one, let's just do like 10 on the X and -32 on the Y, for example. Okay. And then let's copy this. And I'm going to put one at like, I don't know, 0.5, 0.8. I'm just going to go about every 3 ticks on here. I don't know, something like this. I'm just kind of guessing right now. Okay. How far does this go? Yeah, we can add a couple more. So we'll add one at, what was that one? 0.7. We can add one at 2, and then we'll just maybe do one more over here. Okay, now we're just going to go to each of these and just provide a different value. And actually, if you zoom out, you can see that it's calling explosion with that vector2 value. It's kind of nice that it shows it there. But we can just come in here and select each of these and set just a different value. So for the next one, we could just, I'm doing this as random as I can in my brain. Okay, so we're just going to give a different offset to each of these, varying negatives and positives and different values. Now I'm only doing negative numbers on the Y because I want this explosion to be up, not at the base of the boss, but somewhere up here. And remember, Y negative is up. So I'm never going to do a positive Y value in any of these. And you should avoid the same unless somehow your sprite is positioned differently than mine. Okay, so we'll just go through these and just make sure that they each have a unique value so that we're not getting any overlap. Continue to vary those. Where did I go? Right here. We just have, what, 2 more of these to do? Oh boy, I don't know, 6. We'll just leave that at -32. We've only used that one other time. And then I'll keep that at 10 and I'll make this like a -24. Maybe make this, I don't know, something different, 8. Okay. So now when we play the animation and preview it here, we're not going to see the explosions because these method calls won't happen in the editor, but when we run the game, we should. And for the sake of brevity, I'm going to select the boss. I'm going to set his hit points down to 1 so that he's ultra wimpy. Just die in one hit and just throw a boomerang at him. Awesome. One problem, animation is not playing. But you can see that the positions were kind of random. Let's go to our energy explosion. I must have missed setting up something in our animation player with our explode. We just need to make this the autoplay on load animation. And now if we come back here and run this one more time, it should work. Should work a little bit better. Cool. Okay. Now there is one other thing I'd like to do because those explosions really covered up that animation quite a bit. You could have fewer, you could make it smaller. But what I'm going to do is just go back to the energy explosion scene. And if you recall, in our previous videos where we made the ball and the energy beam attack, we've got a material that we can use. So let's see, just go down to the, what am I selected on? Let's select the sprite, not the animation player. And then here under material, we can go ahead and let's just go quick load. We have only got one material, but this light material, I'm gonna use that. And then when we run the game again and kill him, this time it should have a different appearance. You can kind of see the boss through those explosions. All right. Okay, so that's how the boss is going to look when he dies. Now you can change that any way you like, but there's how I've set that up. We've got a defeatable boss. All right, so now that we've got the boss working this far, let's go ahead and move on to another piece. So I'd like to work on the ability for the boss to be able to move around, then teleport around the scene. So let's go ahead and get that going. I'm going to come up towards the top and I'm going to create a new function here that we're going to call teleport. And if I could type without getting those brackets in there. Okay. So what is this going to be responsible for? The teleport action needs to play an animation where he disappears, move his location, and then make him reappear. Okay. And we can make it so that it's like a random, it chooses a random location from the different positions that we've got. And as a reminder, those positions are going to be these 4 spots that are indicated that we, created with our little position targets. So let's go back to our script. Now this teleport function, we should tell it which location we want to teleport to. So we're going to give it an argument called location. And this will be just an integer because it's, 0, 1, 2, or 3. It's going to be one of those 4. Okay. So that's what we'll pass into this teleport. And then as we mentioned, the first thing we'll do is we'll grab our animation player and we'll play the Dissapear animation. All right. And then we also want to, at this point, use that enable hitboxes function, and we're going to pass in false. We want to disable the hitboxes so that while the boss is disappearing, you can't damage him, and the player won't be damaged by walking into him either. Okay, so we'll go ahead and do that. And we'll add some other things in here. Like I want to add the ability to shoot a fireball when he teleports, but we'll do that later in a later step. Okay. And then what we will do here is we will await, and we'll just set a little timer. So we'll say get tree.create timer. Now we could await the animation finish, but in this case, I don't want it to be like instant. I want there to be just a little pause. So we'll just set a timer for 1 second and wait for that timeout. And then what we're going to do is we're going to update the location of the boss node. Okay. And we're going to need to update animations and do some other things as well. So let's start with the boss node. We've got a reference to that, boss node dot global position equals. And what we're going to do is we are passing in a location, right? Which is kind of like, we'll use that as like the index of the location that we want to teleport to. So looking at our variable, we've got our positions. So if we passed in 1, it would be the, second item in the array. And so on. Okay, so let's go in here and we'll just go, so we'll grab the positions at that index. So positions, and then use the location as the index. Okay, so we're going to get that. And then I want to also at this point store our current position. This way we can keep track of which one we're at, so that hopefully the boss won't disappear and reappear at the same spot. Okay, that's what we're going to use this for. So that just equals location. Okay, then we need to update our animations. And I'm going to make a comment here because we're not going to do it in this block of code. And then after we do that, we're going to play our appear animation. And then at this point, we do want to await for this animation to finish. So we'll just put an await here. Animation player dot animation finished. And then once that's done, we will enter an idle state, okay? Which we don't have that yet either. Okay, so that's kind of how the flow of this teleport is going to work. And each function that we build in here is going to act kind of as a state. We're going to make them asynchronous and use these await statements so that when you call a function, a series of things will happen and then it will progress to the natural state of the boss that follows. In this case, it would be idle. Okay. So let's go ahead and let's just see if this kind of works. Let's go ahead and in our ready function, at the very end of the ready function, let's just go ahead and call teleport, and we'll pass in 0. So it'll just go to the first location. We won't make it random on the first one, but from that point forward, we will. So let's go ahead and run this, and we should see, okay, the boss disappeared and reappeared, okay, in his new spot. One issue here, the hitboxes were not re-enabled because we didn't do that in our code. So, he can't damage us, we can't damage him. But that's okay because the teleport worked. That was the point of that little test there. And in fact, let's go ahead and create our idle function down here and pass that in, because inside the idle is where we will re-enable those hitboxes. So the first line here can just be enable hitboxes. Okay. And we don't need to pass true because it does that by default. And then we will do more in this idle state later. But for now, let's just work a little bit more on this. Okay, so obviously here we need to call idle. And actually, let's go ahead now and let's work a little bit on this idle state, because it'll be, if we get this going, then it'll kind of make the whole boss fight come full circle. The idle state's going to handle a lot of the logic. So after we enable the hitboxes, what we want to do in the idle is we want to play the idle animation, right? So I'm going to just say animation player dot play, and then we're going to have it play idle. And we're going to do quite a bit more, but let's just start here so that we can see, okay, is it doing the idle animation? And then what we can do now is await for that animation to finish. We recall that we haven't set any of these animations to loop. Okay, so they will have an animation finished signal. So animation player dot animation finished. We'll await that. Okay, and then what we could do is we could just teleport again. So let's go ahead and set that up. We want to teleport to a random location. So, and we don't want it to be our current location. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to get a variable. We can just call it t, and it's an int, and this will equal our current location, or current position is what we call that variable. Okay, so that's going to be a number from 0 to, that's going to be a number from 0 to 3, depending on whatever we last called in the teleport, right? Because see here in teleport, we're going to set that. And then next, we'll say this. We're going to do a while. And what a while loop does is it will just keep repeating the code until a condition is met. So we're going to say while underscore t equals current position. So we're going to set it to the current position here, but we don't want it to stay the current position. So we're going to manipulate t until it's no longer the current position. We could just do some basic math, but what I want to do is we'll just make a random integer range. We'll use the randi range function. So the from would be 0 and the to would be 3. So it'll just pick a random number until it's no longer equal to the current position. And then we can teleport to that index. Okay. So now if we run the fight, what we should see is the boss should teleport, and then he'll idle, and then he'll teleport, and he'll pick a random location. Okay. So that's working. Of course, he's not facing the correct direction. We want to handle that. So let's go ahead and take care of that. And that's what we're going to do with this update animations. And maybe that needs a different name, but we'll just make then a function that we call update animations, just like that. So I'll just come down here and make this new function. And what does this need to do? Well, we need to, it's called update animations, but what it's going to do is it's going to update the hands. If you recall, we set up different hands in different positions, and we also want to play a different version of the cloak animation depending on the direction where we should be facing, or maybe the location that we're in, or I should say not we, but the boss. So let's do this. First thing is let's go ahead and check our position. So if our current position equals 0, then what we want to do is we want to play the cloak's regular animation, and we don't actually have a reference to that yet. So let's go ahead and grab that. So here under our cloak sprite, we've got an animation player, and I'm just going to give that the name of cloak animation player. Okay. Then we can come back down here. So if our current position is 0, then we're going to say cloak animation player.play. So 0 is top facing down, so we can play down. And then we can do an elif, another condition, if the current position, we'll do the bottom, which is 2. So if it equals 2, then we can say the cloak animation player.play. And in this case, we want to play up. And if it's not either of those, then it'll be the side, and we can just do an else. We know that it's going to be side if it's not top or bottom. So we can tell it to play side. Okay, but of course we also need to flip it. So if the current position is, in this case, it's either going to be 1, which is on the right, or 3, which is on the left. And by default, that animation is facing from left to right. So that's good for position 3, but if it's on position 1, we need to flip it. And we're going to flip it by actually just scaling the boss node. So let's do a check first. So if the current position equals 1, then what we can do is we can just get our boss node and set the scale equal to, and a scale is a vector 2 with an x and a y scale. And so what we want is a -1 on the x and a 1 on the y. Now we also need to set this scale by default. Obviously we only want this scale if the current position is 1. Now we could add logic and say if the position is any of the others, then we reset it, but the easiest way would just be to reset the scale to regular 1 and 1 at the beginning of this function. That way it's appropriate for any of these conditions until we get here, right? And then if it matches this one condition, it'll flip it. Otherwise, it'll stay normal. So let's go ahead and just give that a run and let's see what happens. As he teleports around, we should see him changing directions. Okay, except the hands are messed up, but at least the cloak is doing the right way. And in fact, for the sake of testing, there we go, we got the bottom. For the sake of testing, it would be nice if we could see each position in order. So I'm going to just comment out this random teleport code for just a moment. And instead, we'll say variable _t int equals current position plus 1. And then we'll just do a quick check. So if current position is greater than 3, then or I shouldn't say current position, we're doing t here. If _t is greater than 3, then _t equals 0. So what that'll do is this should just cycle around the different positions in order. So it should go clockwise. So it should go top, then right, then bottom, and then next left. Okay. So now we can test that. We'll keep this code active until we're happy with the other code that we're going to put in this update animation. So we need to deal with the hands that are visible. And we didn't put those in as part of the animation. And now you could, but I devised a different way to do it. And we've got just a different, we've got a grouping of hands, and they each kind of serve a different purpose, right? But I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to grab a reference to each hand. So you can drag all of those in. Now that we've got these hands in here, we can go back down to our animation, update animations function. And what we're going to want to do is we've got these different hands, and we're going to set them each to have a visibility. Okay. So we're going to turn off the hands that we don't want to see and turn on the ones that we do. So by default, we can just turn them all off to start with. So let's see, we've got hand 1, right? We can set the dot visible of that to false. Okay, and then we just have to repeat this for the other hands. So we've got hand 2, and I'm going to go ahead and copy this dot visible, and we'll just go through each of the hands, and I'll do that real quick. Okay, so you should have 6 hands there that you've set visible to off. And then what we do is just with each group. So for example, the hands 01 are the ones when we're facing down. We can just come in here to the condition where we're going to be looking down. And then we can just set these to true. And then likewise for the ups and the sides, we can set those appropriately. Just come in here, set it to true. And then last but not least, we'll get our side hands and we'll set them visible in this function. And what I did there is it's Control and Alt, and then you can do multiple lines and you can type. Control Alt and click. You can kind of click and you can type on multiple lines at once. It's kind of a handy little trick. I don't use it too often in here, but you know, little bit of freebie for you. Okay, so there we go. So then what we're doing is we're enabling the hands that we want to see visible. They're not going to quite work properly just yet because, as you recall, we only animated hand 01 and hand 02. But let's just run and make sure that the correct ones are appearing. And then if they are, we'll figure out how to animate them here. So that one looks good. There we go. Hands on the side, hands on the bottom. I think we got that right, except that obviously they're the wrong animation frames. Like they should be different, right? These ones should be facing forward, etc. So how we're going to handle the hands actually is another kind of unique thing. And I did this because I don't really like having to animate all the hands, and then if I change it, have to go back and just change duplicate things, right? I don't know if that's making sense. So I felt like it's not a ton of work, but there's enough work involved with animating the hands that I didn't think it was wise or prudent to want to animate them kind of all the same. And in addition to that, I think it was a fun challenge. So what we're going to do is instead we're going to make the other hands in the different positions mimic the frames, but with an offset. So we only need the one set of keyframes for animating the hands, and all the other ones will follow suit. And then like we've done, we're just going to show or hide them. I probably should have explained that better up front. Hopefully it wasn't too confusing why we're doing this. But in order to make this happen, we're going to go to our process function. And in here, what we're going to do is we need our hands. So we didn't animate the position or the frames for our other hands. And so what we can do is we can mimic those, or we could match them or copy them, right? So what we'll do is we'll start with our up. So we'll say hand up dot position equals hand 01 dot position. We're doing this in the process, so it's going to happen every frame, okay? And then likewise, we'll get the hand 01 up frame dot frame. Since it's a sprite 2D, it has a frame, and we'll set it equal to the hand 01 dot frame. Okay, so as those are changing, as the animation player is changing those on hand 01, it's going to update hand 01 underscore up dot, whatever frame and position. And this only works because we're only animating them up and down in the frames. If we were doing side to side, it might not work quite right. Okay, but this should work pretty good. And then we'll go ahead and I'm going to go ahead and copy this and paste it. And then this should become, obviously we need to do this for hand 2. Okay, so we can just change these to 2 like so. And then we'll copy all of this and paste it one more time. And this time what we're going to do is change the up to side. And so this is a good time to use that Control Alt and oops. Where did I go? I don't know. Is it just Alt? Yeah, just Alt and click. I guess you don't need the control because Control click will take you to the where you declared a variable, but add that period back. Okay, so there we go. So then we've got our hand, side, position, and frame. Okay, all of these being updated. And I think that's all correct. So let's go ahead and run this one more time, and then we should see that taking place. So obviously when he's facing down, it's fine. Uh-oh, that didn't work. Neither did that, and neither did that. Okay, did we get an error? No errors. Oh, well, there is a pretty big problem. We copied the frame. This is almost correct, but what we need to do, and this is going to make more sense when I show it. When we look at the hand, and I guess we got to get our boss to an animation where we can see him real quick. So there we go, reset. So when we look at the hand and we look at the frames, there are 16 frames, right? And so if we have a closed fist and we want to do it from, the bottom, then we have to go up to frame 4, right? So you see that's the closed version, and then it'll open, and then same for the side, it's frame 8, okay? And there's actually 2 versions of the side because there's like a left and a right-handed side. So there's frame 8 and then there's frame 12. Okay, so then what we got to do is in our script here where we're setting the frame, we actually need to do some basic math, and it's actually really simple. So this is just +4 on hand 01, okay? And same with this hand 02 frame, just +4, because these are both just the forward facing, changing to the back facing. For the side, it's a little bit different because, again, as I was pointing out, there's 2 versions of the side, right? There's like from the left and then there's from the right. I don't know if that made any sense. It's hard to get that in the camera. Okay, so what we need to do then with these frames is offset them. So I think, let's see, this first hand 01 side, I believe should be +8. Nope, not _8, but +08. And then this one should be +12 for the hand 02 side frame. Now let's try running this again. I hope it works. Not quite. It's looking pretty good on the backwards one. It's not good on the side one. Let's go ahead and swap these to 8 and 12. And actually, let me just double check. Let me double check what I've got going on here. And actually, I see what I did is we're setting the position here, which I do want to do. I made a mistake earlier in the video, and let's look at this. When I set up the position for the side hands, I actually set them using this position. That unfortunately is not quite going to work because we're overriding the position, right? So instead of the position, what we need to do is we need to give these side hand sprites an offset that will help them match. And so I'm going to come over to my handle 1 real quick. This is 20 and 4. And so let's just set this to 20 and 4. Okay. And then this other hand 2 side, let's look at it should be what, negative 20 and 4. So let's set this to negative 20 and 4. Okay, so that's where the positions are. Now ignore the fact that one's behind and one's in front. We want to keep that happening. We just need to adjust them. So let's get our cloak animation to be the side version so that it makes sense again. Now instead of adjusting the position on these hands, we're going to adjust the offset. And so we'll go here, and the offset, then if we look at this, right, we can change this value. And what we want is about a negative 12. That'll get it close to where it was, I think. And then here we'll do negative 4. That's kind of where we had it. And then with this other hand, we can set this offset to 20. That's not feeling quite right to me. I'm not sure why I thought 20. Did I reset the transform properly, I wonder? Oh, so I'm doing it again. I'm changing the transform and not the offset. I just keep bad habit. Okay, here we go. Offset. So this one, the offset, let's set it offset by 20, and then we'll offset the Y by 4. There we go. So then it drops it down. Okay, so sorry for the confusion. This is just natural part of me trying to explain it. Unfortunately, this is a pretty complicated long video, so you know, things like this will happen. But I think if we run it now, it should look better. And if that wasn't too confusing, then hopefully you can see how that's kind of a cool benefit. Except I went and I changed the stinking I went and I changed the frames, which we don't really want to do. Let's go back. There's probably 1 or 2 more things we need to do here. I think I had the frames correct the first time, where that's 8 and that's 12. And let's go ahead and let me just check these again here. This other hand is flipped. We don't want to flip this one. I'm going to turn that off. Okay, so hand 2 should not be flipped. I think those positions for the frames, or those numbers for the frames, are correct. So let's try this, hopefully for the last time. And we'll fix how the boss looks goofy at the beginning there. Okay, so here we go. All right, so the hands from the side and the back and the other side. Okay, so there we go. Now it's working. And now any animation that we build, those will just copy, and we don't have to do it per animation. So I don't know if the squeeze is worth the juice on that one, but anyway, kind of a fun thing that you can do. You can totally just copy frames and things like that from an animation and apply it to something else, okay? So the last thing we need to do is let's just reset this visibility on these hands and everything so that we're playing the proper animations when we start. And this one's already set to play down. And so finally, now when we get back here, the boss should look good. There we go. And he's super easy to kill, which is awesome. One hit kill bosses. Okay, headshot with a boomerang maybe. There we go. Okay, so we've got those animations. We've got the idle going. There's probably a little bit more work. Let's look at the idle script again and the teleport, and let's just do a little bit more work on these. So in the idle, we're going to add some more functionality to the idle script here, but now that we're happy with the different directions, we should be able to uncomment those lines. Control K, by the way, is the shortcut for that. And I'm just going to go ahead and delete those other lines for testing. So now we're back to the random teleportation and ready to move on. Okay, so the next step in this idle and in his states here is I want him to be able to do an attack now. We want the boss to actually start fighting back. So to this purpose, I don't need to change script there. I just want to come to my boss node. That's what I meant to click on. And let's set his max HP to like 3 for now so that he takes 3 hits again to kill. And then eventually we'll reset that back to 10 or whatever feels good to you. but I want to kind of play around with this. So let's address the energy beam attack. If we look at our scene, we've got all these beams in the beam attack. I'm going to turn this back on. Okay. We've got 6. We've got 3 that are horizontal and 3 that are vertical. So we want to kind of deal with these now. So let's go back to our script. And I'm going to scroll to the top. And in order to keep track of the beam attacks, here's what we're going to do. We're going to create a new array. And it's just a variable that we'll call beam attacks. And it's just going to keep a reference to all of them. Okay. And it's going to be an array. What am I doing? I'm typing with quotes here. Colon array, and this is an array of beam attack nodes. Okay, so we've got beam attacks. Let's go ahead and grab those in our onready. So we don't need this print positions anymore, but let's create a new for statement. So for b in, we're gonna do the same thing where we just did the position targets. Let's find our beam attacks node, just drag and drop that in there. .get children. Like so. And then we can go to our beam attacks.append, and then we'll just do B. Okay. So we're just going to simply iterate through the children and add them to an array. So you should only be adding beam attacks to this node. Okay. So we've got the 3 horizontal and the 3 vertical. So it's just going to create an array that tracks those. Then next, let's create a function where we can actually trigger this. So I'm going to come down somewhere. Just at a random spot. I don't know. I'm doing this before damage taken and right after update animations. Let's create a function that we call energy beam attack. Okay, so we can call this function at any point to trigger an attack with those. And we're going to, what we want to do, this is going to be kind of tricky, right? Depending on where the boss is, I want to do something slightly different. So for example, if the boss is up here, then I think I would like to do, you know, like some of these horizontal beams. Okay. And if the boss is on one of the sides, we'll do some of the vertical ones. And if they're at the bottom, horizontal again. Okay. So we can change it. Now you could just randomly pick 1 or 2 of these and turn them on, and that's perfectly fine. So maybe what I'm doing is overthinking it a little bit, but I think it's kind of nice to do it like that, so it's a little bit more predictable. So I'm going to start by creating an array, another array, okay? And what this array is going to be is an array. It's going to be an integer array or an array of integers. So what we're going to do is we're going to, obviously, since we've got our beam attacks and they're in an array, they're each represented or referenced. They've each got an index between 0 and 5, I guess. And so what we're going to do is we're going to pick a couple random indexes that fit our criteria, and then we'll go turn all of those arrays on. Okay. So the first step is populating this array and randomly selecting the beams that we want to activate. And so we'll do that by first looking at our current position. So we use a match statement for this. It's like an if statement, right? Except what we say is we're matching the current position. And if the current position is 0 or 2, that means it's at the top or the bottom. And so if it's 0 or 2, right, if this is kind of like saying if current position equals 0 or current position equals 2, then what we'll do is we want to append certain beams to our array. If the boss is either at the top or the bottom, then what I want to do is I want to turn on the beam at the level that matches the boss's position, and then pick one of these other ones at random. So if the boss is here, then we'll turn on this first horizontal beam and pick another one at random. If the boss is at the bottom, we'll turn on the bottom one and another random one. Okay, that means the player can't just hide next to the boss and hit him for a free hit necessarily, because he will risk taking damage. So what we'll do here is, even though we've already kind of pre-matched 0 and 2, we are going to do a check. So if current position equals 0, meaning the boss is on the top, then we're going to append to our array the index of 0, because that's where he is. That's where the beam that covers that area. And then we'll select at random one of the other 2, which if we look at the way it's laid out, this is 0 on the top, and then 1 is the middle, and 2 is the bottom. So we'll just pick from a random range, random I underscore range. And in this case, we want to pick between 1 and 2. Okay. Pretty simple, I think. And then if that's not true, if current position does not equal 0, then that means it's on the bottom. So we'll just do an else here. And then what we want is we want to force beam 2 to turn on in this case. That's the bottom one. Oops, what did I do? Underscore append, underscore B dot append. And then we'll go underscore B dot append again. And this time we'll copy this little statement, but instead of arrange between 1 and 2, we'll do it between 0 and 1. Okay, so we'll turn on one of the other two. Okay, so that's how that's going to select for the top. And then in addition, we'll also make this scale with difficulty. But let's go ahead and even though we're not finished with this match statement and all of this, I want to get it to the point where we can start testing it. So I'm going to come down here and go back to the first indent of my thing. So we're exiting, we're no longer in the match statement. We're just back to the root of this function. I'm going to say for B in underscore B. So for each beam in the beam array, if you recall, those are beam attacks, and they've got a function called attack. So I'm going to say beam attacks dot, or beam attacks at the index dot attack. Okay, so we're going to just go through each of the beams that we've selected and tell it to initiate. So I'm going to go ahead and save that. In order for us to be able to test this, though, we need to include it somewhere. So let's go to our idle function here. And after we've idled, but before we teleport, let's go ahead and engage a beam attack. Okay, and so that's going to consist of a couple things. So we need to do energy beam attack, but we also have an animation that goes along with that. And so animation player.play, and what did we call it? I think we call it cast spell. Let's just double check that real quick. Do we have a cast spell? Yeah, we do. And I didn't really specify this, but I kind of built the cast spell with this delay that also matches the blinking of those lines in our beam attack. If you recall from the previous video where we built that, it kind of flashes 3 times before the beam fires. So if we call those both at the same time, then we should get a pretty good result. And then let's just go ahead and await our animation. Otherwise, we're going to teleport before it happens, right? So await animation player dot animation finished. And then we can get on to the teleport. So let's go ahead and test this out. I hope it works. It's only going to work for the top or bottom, but let's see here. There we go. Cool. He randomly picked the side. He's going to play it, but there's no, our energy beam attack code doesn't work on the bottom, or on the sides. So there we go on the bottom. You can see how it randomly chose the middle one, and the top's going to go again. Okay, so now we have to be dodging these. You know, we'll make it a little bit harder, but we have to dodge those as we try and fight the boss. Okay, so that's kind of working. We know it's working. Let's go ahead and finish. There we go. Let's finish our energy beam attack function. Before we scale this, let's go ahead and set our other conditions. So if it's on the sides, 1 or 3. Okay. Then we'll check if current position equals 1. And in fact, I'm just going to go ahead and put this code in here so that you don't have to watch me type it. And then you can just pause it, copy it over if that's what you need to do. Okay, so we will append 5 if the position is 1, right? Meaning over here, then we're going to append the 5th item, which that's 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I think I've got that wrong. Yeah, this should probably be if this equals 3. I think I got my if wrong there. Okay, let's go ahead and test this. If this is working, we should now get a beam attack when the boss teleports to the side. Okay, here we go on the side. There we go. Nice, he went to the other side. Okay. So seems to be working. Now let's go ahead and we can scale the attacks in this fashion. I think what we want to do is we want to add an additional beam, maybe, if the boss's health is below a certain level. So we'll say if hit points is less than, in this case, let's say 5. He's starting out with 3 hit points, so this is always going to happen, but that's okay. So if the HP is less than 5, once he's got 10, that's like half of his health, right? Then what we can do is we can add in. So for when he's on the top or bottom, we'll just add in 2 of the side beams, or 1 of the side beams, I should say, 1 between 3 and 5. Okay. And then what we'll do, and I'll paste this in order to make this work on the sides, we'll just append randomly one of the horizontal beams. Okay. So now if we run this, we should see a few extra beams appearing on this case. Yeah, there we go, on the side there. Okay, so that's going to definitely make it a little bit harder to dodge in some cases. Okay, fewer positions for the player to go to without being damaged. And that's how we'll build the beam attack. Now you can go through and adjust how you select these to get any kind of desired effect you want, but that's how I determine to do the energy beam attacks. Okay, pretty straightforward, I think. So back to the idle, this is just happening. We're calling this as part of that idle phase of the boss before or after he teleports. Let's integrate the energy ball that we've built as well into this boss battle. So this will be pretty quick. And how I'm going to build this is it'll fire a ball after you damage the enemy, after you damage the boss, once he's been hurt at least once, maybe. So we just need another constant variable because we're going to, if you recall, we built this energy ball that after it's instantiated, we'll just look at the player position and then fire in that direction. And that works great. So we'll just call this energy ball scene. And again, this is a packed scene, just like the other one that we created up here. Packed scene, okay, equals preload. And let's find that in our file system. So here's the energy orb scene. I guess I mix terminology all the time. And then what we'll do is we can go down by our energy beam attack, and right after this, let's create a new function. This function will be called shoot. Man, do we call it a ball or an orb? I'm going to go with orb just for fun. Okay, this doesn't need to take in any arguments or return any values. So let's start by creating an instance of this. And again, it could just be a node 2D. We're not going to call any of the methods on this or functions on this orb. Instead, all we're going to do is create an instance of it. Okay. And so we'll say this is, let's see, what is it? Energy ball scene dot instantiate. So we'll just create an instance of that scene and store it in this variable so we can manipulate it just a little bit. So we want to start by adjusting the global position. Now the global position should equal the boss node global position, but we want to offset it because, again, let's just take a glance. The boss, his position is right here, so we want to put it up, kind of up in the middle. Okay, so we'll say global position plus vector 2. And this vector 2 will be a 0 on the x. We don't want to change the x, and we want to move up about 34 pixels, so negative 34. All right. Next, what we need to do is we need to go ahead and add this. So we need to do the add child, and so we're going to say get parent, and then we'll say dot add child. But in this case, we want to do, I'm going to remove those parentheses, and we're going to do this, and we're going to have it call deferred, because the way we're calling this, it's going to be in one of those asynchronous functions with awaits. And so if we don't use call deferred, we're going to get an error. Okay. And so what we got to do in here is just add child, call deferred, and add child is expecting what we want to add, the child we want to add to it. So here we go. That's the EB. And we're good, except one last thing, and that's playing an audio. I'd like to play an audio file. And just for sake of efficiency, let's go ahead and store that audio as a new variable. So this is going to be audio underscore shoot. And this will equal, we have an audio file that we can use, and it's going to be, let's see, boss underscore fireball. Go ahead and use that one. Okay, so there we go. Let's go back down to our shoot orb, and what we're going to play is the audio underscore shoot. And obviously we need to call the shoot orb somewhere if we want that to happen. And actually, where I want to do this is, let's go to our teleport. So you can change how you want to build this. You could make it an alternative maybe to the energy beam attack or whatever you want. But I had already commented here in the teleport that I wanted to shoot a fireball, and I'm going to only do it if the health is less than the max HP. And I'm going to do that for two reasons. One is it's just a simple difficulty thing. The first time you hit the boss, he's not going to shoot an orb. So that's going to trick the player the second time he damages him. But also because we are calling the teleport when we start the battle. And so if we don't put a check in here of some sort, then the boss would fire an orb as soon as you enter the room. I don't think that's very fair. So we'll just do this. If HP is less than max HP. Okay, very simple. Then we will shoot orb. And it's as simple as that. So before we run it, let's increase the health. I'm going to just reset this to 10. We're going to start testing the full boss battle. So, okay, I should be able to hit him once. And there we go. He shot an orb. So now we'll see when he teleports, he's gonna shoot that orb. Okay, and I'm not sure I like how fast that orb moves. You know, you could slow it down. And there actually is, if we look at, I have an error here. It's this animation range. Ignore that for now. So the energy orb, if we open this guy up, this has a speed value, which we have defaulted to 200. We could either set that value in our code, or for what I'm going to do is the lazy way. I'm just going to change the default. The reason why I say lazy is if you ever change the default for some reason, then it's going to mess up your boss fight and you won't notice it. So it might be better to do it through script. Hit F6 to run it. And let's see how this orb looks after. Okay, that's better. That's a little bit more reasonable to dodge, I think. Okay. So there we go. We shoot an orb, but it doesn't happen the very first time. And it'll only happen once you've hit the boss once. Okay. Now I want to come in here. Let's go back to our idle. I want to kind of scale up and ramp up the difficulty. So when we're testing this out, let's just do this real quick. The boss has this idle frame. It makes it pretty easy to find him and get a hit in before he even starts charging up the attack, right? So like, okay, good. I got time to get him and hit him and run away. And so to add a little bit of difficulty in here, I want to give a random chance that the boss won't play the idle animation and he'll just skip it and go straight to the spell cast. And so what we're going to do in our idle is we're going to add an if statement. Okay, and what this is going to say is if we're going to get a random float, so random f will return a random number between 0 and 1. Okay, so if that is less than or equal to, and what we're going to do here is I want to do just like the HP divided by the max HP, because when he's at full health, this random float this condition will never happen. And in fact, I need to reverse this, don't I? If this is greater than, okay, so if this is greater than this, but yeah, what I was saying is this random, because this is between 0 and 1, if the HP is full health, then that means this is 1. So this will never be greater than that. But this is going to give us an error because we're dividing integers. So all we have to do though to fix that is just convert these to a float by writing float and wrapping those integers there. Okay, so those will now become floats and we won't get an error there. Okay, so now what'll happen is we'll pick a number, and if this random number is greater than the health, which the lower the health gets, the higher the probability of this happening will be, then we'll play the idle animation. And let me think about this. I do want it to be less than, don't I? Because I want this to actually play the idle animation. Yeah, anyways, there we go. Okay, so now if we play this, there will be times after we've hit him where he won't do his beam attack, okay? There we go. I got, ooh, 3 hits in. He got 2. So that one, he idled. Let's just give this a second and see. In fact, let me get into the whack in on him. He idled on that one. Idled on that one. Maybe this isn't working. Maybe I need to change this. Oh, there we go. He didn't idle on that one. He just instantly went straight into his attack. And then as we get closer, there, now we're getting an extra beam. Man, he kicked my butt. That little tweak makes that battle quite a bit more difficult. So if you don't like it, you can remove it. But, you know, these are just some ideas on how you could script a boss like this, right? So there we go. We've got our energy beam attack, casting our spell. We've added a little bit of randomization, and the fight is coming along pretty well, I think. Okay, one other thing I want to do to kind of make the boss feel a little bit more dynamic and less predictable is I want to make it so that sometimes if you see him right away and you're able to get a hit in before he casts his spell, he might just teleport and move. Otherwise, as you saw, if I hit him real early, then while that beam is happening, I can hit him as many as 3 times. And that's okay. If the player gets that and they're lucky, that's fine. I just want to make that a little bit less likely to be able to happen, so it feels a little bit more awesome when you do pull it off. Okay. So in order to do this, we need to just track when the enemy gets hit or when the boss gets hit. Let's see. Let's create a new variable here. So I'm going to go up here and I'm just going to make a variable called times damaged. That sounds weird. Damage count, maybe. Okay, so that's an integer and it equals 0. And what we'll do is we'll just use this to track how many times he's been hit since his last teleport. Okay, so we need to update our code in a few places in order for this to work. First, let's go to, I guess, our teleport. So if we go down to our teleport, every time we teleport, we need to reset that. So we'll say damage count equals 0. And then we'll go to our damage taken function, and we need to set that here, right? So we'll just say times, or see, I'm just going back to my bad ways. Damage count plus equals 1. So we'll increase that. It doesn't really matter what the number is as long as it's greater than 0, right? Because we're resetting it to 0, but there we go. Damage count plus equals 1. Now, when we go back to our idle script, this energy beam attack, what we can do is just wrap this with an if statement. So we can say if damage count is less than 1, then we'll do those 3 lines of code. Otherwise, we'll skip it. So if you hit the boss too early, then you're not going to be able to get multiple hits in. So what that'll look like is if I hit him right away, he should just teleport away. Yep. But this one, see, I waited. I got a second hit in, but he got a hit in on me as well. Okay. There we go. The other downside to hitting him early is that he then shoots that ball at you right away, so you got to dodge it. All right. And for the most part, we have a functioning boss, except I can just leave the room at any time. Okay, so let's go ahead now and also address that. Okay, so let's go to our boss scene. So we've got our door here, and what we're going to do is really simple, actually. I'm going to duplicate this dungeon map, tile map, and I'm going to come in here. Let me turn off the visibility of this other one. Because I duplicated it, I duplicated all the tiles, and I actually don't want that. So let me just get the eraser and rectangle tool selected, and I'll just click and drag and delete everything. Okay, I'll turn my map back on. So now I've got an empty map. And as a side note, something that we need to do is we've got an issue because these are a deprecated type of tile map. I'm going to go ahead and with this one, I'm going to convert this to the new type. So it says tile map node is deprecated, must use the tile map layer nodes. And what we can do is they've added a feature in here. There's an extract tile map layers as individual tile map layer nodes. We only have one layer in our tile set. So when we click this, it's going to give us a layer. We can just drag this out of that. And I'm going to delete that. Okay. So that's how you can convert your tile map. Pretty easy. Obviously this one's a scene that we've saved, so, and there's a script attached, so I'm not going to do that to this one right now. But you could rewrite the script to work with the new type of tile map, and we'd be fine there. And then what we'll do is we'll just come into this layer. I'm going to zoom in over my doorway here. And let's make our palette a little bit larger. We want to draw. I'm going to get rid of the erase, unselect the eraser tool here. And we just need like a bottom wall. Okay. Something like this. And I'm just going to paint that in like that. Okay. So it covers it up. So you can see now this tile layer is just a wall, and it will block the player because it's got all the collision and everything set up. And what we can do is we can just enable or disable that layer. See how that works? When it is disabled, it disappears, and it will also disable the collision. And when we enable it, it's on. Okay, so by default, I'm going to go ahead, I'll just leave this on. I'm going to go ahead and save this. And then let's go to our script. And I think it's worth renaming this layer, and I'm going to call it door block. Okay. And let's get a reference to it in our script. So let's see, I guess in our onready variable somewhere, we'll grab it. Just going to drag, hold control and drop. Okay. So we've got this door block tile map layer reference now. And we need to do two things. If we've defeated the boss, we don't want this door block to turn on, or we want it to disappear. And so we'll do a check in here. In fact, the first thing that we're going to do in here is we have our persistent data handler, and we're going to say get value. We want to make sure it's got a value before we do this, otherwise it might not work. And then we'll just say if persistent data handler dot value equals true, then that means that the boss has been defeated. Okay. And in fact, you might want to rename the persistent data handler so that it makes more sense to you. If that's confusing, you could rename it to like boss defeated, right? Essentially, this thing is just a true or false value. But if it's true, then what we'll do is we'll get our door block and we'll set the enabled. See, there's an enabled value equals false. And we can also get rid of this whole boss node part of the scene tree. So we can just call queue free, just like that, and then say return. We don't need to finish. We don't need to set up the boss. We don't need to do any of this other stuff, right? If we've defeated the boss, just get rid of it. Don't do it. Okay. I'm gonna go ahead and save that. Now that only handles disabling that door block if we've defeated the boss. And of course we already did, let's see, where is it? In our defeat function, we do have persistent data handler set value, but we need to reopen the room. Means we need to get rid of that door block. Okay, but this set value is what's going to set that to true, so that the next time we come in the room, it doesn't trigger the boss. And really all we need to do here is just say door block dot enabled equals false, and we're good to go. That's going to turn off the door. So as soon as we beat the boss, and as soon as this animation is finished, then the door is going to disable. And so that we can test this quickly, let's go ahead and just give the boss 2 hit points. And let's run our game, or run this scene, I should say. And let's hit our boss a couple times. Nope. Boom. So as soon as this ends, oh no. Almost worked, huh? It cleared the door, and then the boss, surprise sneak attack boss, killed me. What a terrible, terrible fate. Don't do that to your players. It's a good thing we found that bug. What did we do wrong here? So what we have done wrong actually is one thing that I kind of knew I skipped, but was not present of mind as I'm working through this. Let's go to our idle. We've got all these awaits, and then the problem with awaits is things can happen in your code, and then once you get past the await, sometimes it can do unexpected things. Like in this case, the boss died, the defeat animation played, but then maybe one of these awaits finished and it picked up and it just brought him back to life essentially. So let's put a little bit of code in here to prevent that. What we're going to do is every time we end an await, I'm just going to do a check. If HP is less than 1, then return. We'll do that again right here. if HP is less than 1. In fact, I'm going to do that outside of that statement, just right there, just in case. Okay. I think that should handle it. Let's go ahead and just test this one more time. And hopefully we should be able to kill the boss and he will stay dead and not assassinate us. Ta-da! And you probably want to play like a cool sound effect and maybe reveal an item because the player just defeated the boss, and that's a pretty big deal. But this video is getting really long in the tooth, and so I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up right there. But as always, I want to thank everybody for coming and following along with these tutorials, and it would request that you subscribe to my channel if you haven't yet, so that you can see what else is coming in the future. And, you know, give this video a like if it's helped you, and comment below as well. All those things help my channel grow, helps it so I can bring more content out in the future. And I appreciate everybody. And as always, we'll see you next time. And I should test. I don't have a key, so that door was locked because I'm doing it out of order. Let's just see. Right, the boss should be gone if I go back into that room. It's a weird song. I think I need a better jingle. It's kind of goofy. There we go. No boss. He's dead. I killed him and he's gone. And now this door is open too, so I can go in and out. Nifty.